goodness. Ooh, I'm eating that. Welcome to Psychology of Gaming. All the other panels I've been to read off their descriptions, so I'm going to do that as well. Explore the psychological aspects of gaming, including why we play, how it impacts our emotions and behavior, and its potential benefits and downsides. I am just going to turn to my panelists here and have you guys go down the line and introduce yourselves and your relationship with games and psychology, starting with you.
Hi, I'm Allyson. I am a podcaster with the podcast Gaming Fix, and I also am an associate editor and writer at Nintendo World Report. I love video games, and I think there's a lot of really interesting topics surrounding psychology, so I was very excited to do this panel.
Hi, my name's Prof. I am a game designer. I've been making games for 17 years. I started at Insomniac Games back in the PS3 era working on the Resistance franchise and also on Sunset Overdrive. I did some indie stuff for a while. I worked on Hyper Light Drifter. I worked at Bungie on Destiny 2 from launch to the Beyond Light expansion. I worked at Firewalk on Concord, which was the game that released, and then Sony pulled it 2 weeks later. Very sad, but amazing team, amazing experience. I regret nothing. And currently I'm working at EA on a secret unannounced project. And as far as psychology and gaming, it's kind of deeply inherent to game design as a craft. So I'm always thinking about it constantly.
My name is John. I'm a writer and actually a physician. I have a pretty strong background in psychology, and that's kind of the reason why I was interested in this panel. But I'm an absolutely horrible gamer, and I'll explain why if anybody wants to hear it. But anyway, I do love tabletop gaming with my buddies, so that's part of the reason why I was interested in the panel.
Excellent. And again, my name is Nick. I do not review games or build games or any of those, but I did dabble in psychology and I play a lot of games. And I run an after-school, middle-school board game club. And if you've not messed with middle schoolers' heads, you've really not had a good time. I guess, let's see, a good first question would be, why do you guys think we're doing this panel? Like, how does psychology relate to games and the idea of gameplay in general?
I could literally talk for an hour about this.
We have exactly an hour.
But games are fundamentally about making human experiences, and experiences, that's how we interact with the world. So understanding your player's mindset, being able to understand what motivates them is huge. It's a strange medium compared to other artistic mediums like writing or film, because the player has so much autonomy and you have to work within that unpredictability. And so having an understanding of just the basic human psychology lets you do anything from indirectly control where they're going to go to understanding how this type of player's motivation for why they play games is different from this one. And it's just deeply ingrained to the experience of making games.
Yeah, I think that gaming is just such a deeply psychological medium just because of how much interaction there is. You are directly, interacting with the medium in a way that you might not with the movie. So, with the movie you might be able to look away or talk to somebody else or something, but really you have to be the person inside the game in a lot of ways. And sometimes the games can play with that in interesting ways. Which is cool. And I think also one of the things that I was interested in is that it's not only just the game design, but also how a lot of people are using things for like marketing or for monetization. That's becoming very psychologically linked. So it's I think important to recognize where those things are happening.
So I feel like I don't have a lot of background for designing games or being really in the industry of that, but I feel like when I'm gaming, I'm a different person than I am when I'm not gaming. When I'm not gaming, I tend to be kind of reserved, I tend to be kind of quiet, but when I am gaming, just checking there's no kids here, I'm an asshole. and I kind of I kind of like the opportunity to be an asshole once in a while, because you can't do that in reality without consequences, right? So I feel like that change that takes place in myself, and it happens with other people at the gaming table as well in different ways, that is a pertinent component of this, in my opinion.
Some famous person said, I forget who, that like the way to truly know someone is to play a game with them, and you will learn about who they are more quickly and thoroughly than any deep conversation.
I have some very dear, dear friends who are incredibly kind-hearted people who I would not play board games with ever because they're the worst. Risk? No. There's kind of a cool through line of what you guys were all saying about sort of, it sounds like kind of an escapism vibe, that like this is a way to either be your truer self or like be someone else in general. And I would say lately I've been really enjoying escapism just from things going on. Do you guys have any ideal games that give you an escapism, and do you usually go for more being someone other than yourself or being more yourself than you can usually be?
It's interesting because I feel like you could have entire panels or I was looking at a couple of studies on people who play games and why they could play games before the panel, and it's so interesting because there's so many different varieties of video games that are, I feel like, different are applicable to various different situations where you might be playing a game to be, kind of zone out, or play a game to be kind of do the multitask while watching a movie or something. I tend to gravitate personally towards RPGs, so that's kind of probably my biggest escapism, is that idea of becoming another character and being completely enveloped in a different world. But I think that it's interesting to talk about this as from the perspective of it being gaming, because there are so many ways where that gaming can be a game. It's different to play Final Fantasy versus Tetris or something.
So I'm going to say the phrase player motivation about 1 billion more times tonight, but I am a work player. The things that appeal to me in games are basically, who played No Man's Sky when it launched? Okay, so that game was perfect for me because it had problems because it was marketed as an exploration game, but it wasn't. It was a work game, and that was exactly the thing I need to escape. I just want to go and mind the things and complete the tasks. And when I'm playing something like Elden Ring, my favorite experience is when I fire up the game and I have that moment of, where am I and what was I doing? And that feeling of, I'm gonna have little self-directed goals, I'm gonna, make these things, and then on the way I get distracted, and just sort of tumbling into that headspace is what I need to disassociate into an escapism, I suppose.
That's interesting. I wonder, I haven't seen any studies about it, but I wonder what level of dopamine there is to kind of solving a little goal in a game, because I sometimes get to that craving where I'm like, I want a checklist and I can go do all the items on the checklist. One game that was really good for that for me earlier this year was the new Fantasy Life game, which is just all checklists of here you have these 10 different classes and you can do all of the different quests for every class, but here's 20 more quests, and you're like, there's something psychologically pleasing about being able to just finish something or accomplish something concrete and get the little jingle that's like, you did it.
One thing I did learn early in my career, and I forget the source, but there was a study about puzzles, and they discovered, a little jolt you get when you do a puzzle and you're like, yeah, I did it. Apparently that comes from seeing the solution. It doesn't come from completing the puzzle. It comes from seeing the solution, which you can tell when you're trying to figure out something and you see how it comes together, and that's when you get oh, and then you actually do it. And it's also why sometimes if people are stuck on a puzzle and they look up help, they still get the jolt from because it comes from seeing the solution. And I thought that was really cool.
So for the most part, when it comes to like board games and things like that, lately I have a daughter who's 5.5 years old now, and most of the joy I get out of it is letting her think that she won, like she actually won, you know, instead of just like us letting her win. But in terms of actually role-playing games, the one that I've played the most of is Shadowrun, and I've always enjoyed creating characters that let me do kind of whatever I want and not be predictable. I like to not be predictable, and so I have a T-shirt that says I'm chaotic neutral, you know, critically unpredictable, and it kind of is the basis of every character I create. You know.
But it's important to remember that it's different for everyone. There's an amazing organization called Quantic Foundry. Does anyone know Quantic Foundry? You should look them up because their work is incredible. They do a lot of player motivation work, and we're able to break things down into certain like repeated facets, and they're all spectrums. So, you know, if you are like super into achievement like me, like checking the boxes, if you have a super high score in that, certain games appeal to you. But if you have a super low score, then you are more into like free roaming, freely directed things, just more like completely different things. And you have some people that their motivation is all about the social aspect of games. And some people, their motivation is all about the power fantasy and like destruction. And they're very different. And I think the best thing about learning about these things is you start to understand when a game is just not for you, rather than this game sucks. It's just not for you. It's fine. It's just not for you.
Can you repeat what the name of that was?
Quantic Foundry. Yes, I say they're as far as game professionals, they're really, really renowned, and their research has been massively helpful in game design as a whole. And you can also take a little survey to see where your motivation profile lies and stuff like that. It's great.
So we had another panel popping around, I think that was games as educational tools. We can steal a question and shift it into psychology. Are there good games that teach kind of more abstract things like empathy, or like, for example, growing up I was really bad interpersonally. Like I'm masking super hard right now, but I used to like not be able to speak in front of crowds, but I'm doing it. And to better understand interpersonal relationships, The Sims, just the idea of, oh, this interaction, bad. This interaction, hard. And thinking through why certain friends weren't talking to me, I'm like, oh, there were two of the bads. I gotta do a few more hearts before we can hang out again. Really simple human stuff like that. Do you guys have any games that come to mind that teach the more social-emotional or actual psychological traits within a game?
I have an example of how that is very difficult and could easily backfire if you're not careful. So a long time ago, there were these two games. One was called Cart Life, and the other I don't remember the name of, but they were both of their goal was to create empathy for people who were struggling in poverty or people on the streets or whatever. And they both had very different outcomes. In Cart Life, you're going around and you're just sort of, you're helping people like get through certain scenarios and figure out struggles. But in the other one, it was more of, you're in this situation, what do you decide? Like, you know, your car registration is due, but you have to buy food, like what do you decide, and so on and so forth. And Cart Life ended up developing a lot of, achieving its goal. Like people afterwards, when they were asked, they felt like they had a better understanding and empathy for people in poverty. The other one, it had the opposite effect because people started associating the reason people were in poverty from their choices, because the whole game was about making choices. And so at the end, it ended up people were more apt to think that people in poverty were there because of the choices they made. Whereas Cart Life was more about working through the circumstances. And it's very easy to mess that up in games. So you have to be very, very careful with how you just when you're like, I want to make a game that helps people be empathetic towards this plight. You got to be real careful because it can completely backfire.
Yeah, I think that that's hard. That's a hard question because I feel like people all interact with games in such different ways that I can see it being so easy to attempt to make something like that and then realize, oh no, people are taking it differently, or even if most people take it well, but then a few other people kind of don't take it well. I think a lot of RPGs in general, especially the ones where they have some sort of choices, can be really good for kind of that basic kind of interaction in a lot of ways, where you say something and in, like a Mass Effect or Dragon Age or something, and people respond differently to it. And it's very, very simplified. It's not at all accurate to how things are with real life, but it is kind of, I can see that being a good tool for practicing that sort of thing. The other one that just came to mind from the question was something like Undertale, where that is really geared towards kind of guiding you into empathetic choices. You can definitely make choices that aren't empathetic if you play that game, but that's kind of the first thing that came to mind there.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I kind of got nothing on this. I'm not, I don't know if I know enough games that have that.
But you play lots of board games, right? So
board games count.
You have situations where you have players interacting with each other. What kind of games of those are better at creating empathy versus breaking apart families, like Settlers of
Monopoly.
Well, I definitely have a few family members who refuse to play Monopoly with me. And my sister, actually. They refuse to play Monopoly with my sister. But, I'm not sure that I really know a good example, at least one that is as pertinent as the examples you guys have given.
I will say that I think that local multiplayer games have the best potential to change the world for the better than any type of game, and unfortunately they're the ones that never get made because the return on investment is too low. But playing a game with another person side by side on the couch teaches you things about how to interact with other people that you can't learn in like an online multiplayer game. You just can't.
I think also cooperative multiplayer games are also really good for that. My brother just moved back into town, but for a long time he was living out east. So we would connect over the phone and play games together, and we usually liked cooperative puzzle games, and it was really a fun experience to kind of try and bring us together and play these different things. Like we did Escape Academy, we did a couple of, I can't remember the cooperative Rusty Lake game, but that was very fun to play together. But just, there's a lot of really great games out there that are geared towards a couple of people playing together and having to work together to a common goal. And I think that could be a really good thing to have people do, because it does make you learn to cooperate.
Do you guys have any experience with games that use psychology intentionally as a negative or in a predatory fashion? My first thought, I do not play a lot of mobile games on my phone, but a lot of my family members do, and watching the things that those do, either with the fake ads or the fake X's to X out of those ads, or that you have to watch this ad for 30 seconds, or that you have to play the ad to go faster, but now you've almost downloaded the thing anyway. And all of that is very intentionally done. Do any other things come to mind as far as abusing the psychology of games?
I don't want to dominate. You guys should go first this time.
I think that a lot of games that are free to play have some level of that in terms of the monetization. I mean, even in very simple ways where when you pay for something in-game, you have to translate it from US dollars to 500 game bucks. and then that there's often in some of the games several different types of currency inside the game, and that's all just to obfuscate you understanding what you're paying for. So if you knew that you were paying $5 for a skin in something, you might go, well, I don't want to pay $5, but if it's 700 game bucks, then you might do that. And that also comes up in a lot of things with like gotcha mechanics, and I mean, I play them too, but there are certain times where you go, they really want to encourage you to spend as much money as possible, even if it's potentially detrimental to you.
I can think of one scenario where I had used my character to make another character angry at me intentionally, and angry at other players. Not because it's necessarily something that needed to be done either, you know. But in terms of what you're saying about the monetization, I got so sick of even approaching some of those games on the phone because of it that I just gave up on completely, which is probably not necessarily a good thing for me because I kind of enjoyed some of it, you know.
I'm going to take a different spin on it. There are certain type of games that really tweak the sort of the fundamentals of human psychology in a way that creates a negative experience, but the one that people often seek out, like games like Diplomacy, right? Where betrayal is an intentional part of the game, and it can be really intense. There's an excellent GDC talk, it's quite old, it's called The Prototype That Was Banned at Half-Brick. Half-Brick Studios was the studios that made Fruit Ninja, if you remember Fruit Ninja, a long time ago. And he tells a story about a prototype they made, like a multiplayer game, that ended up being so intense that it was disrupting the relationships at work, and they had to ban it. They're like, we have to stop this.
Is this the tank game?
That's the tank game. Yes, that's the tank game.
I was about to talk about the tank.
And but in his talk, he deep dives more into why it happens in similar games and similar qualities. It has to do with non-random outcomes, and it has to do with having to rely on other players, but having a zero-sum state where only one person can win, and it creates this situation psychologically that is just ripe for deeply hurtful betrayal, and some people like that. I personally don't, but there are a lot of games that are similar to that. Diplomacy always comes up as the classic example of a game that will destroy friendships, or a game that will, like, people will play once, right? They'll play this game once and never want to play it again. So that's another take on how you can play with human psychology to get a sort of intended negative outcome.
There's also just the concept of game addiction, which is really, I think, you know, a difficult subject to discuss, just because it's so not known. Like, I was looking at statistics, and they said video game addiction is estimated to be 1.7 to 10% of the U.S. population, which is a huge range. But it's because it's just so, like, people are still not fully understanding to what extent that can be diagnosed, and also to what extent it can be, things are more correlative versus causation, where, for example, there are a lot of studies where they talk about how there might be people who spend a predominant amount of the day gaming and might be at risk of showing lower career attainment, problems with peers, or lower social skills, but to what extent is one causing the other, where maybe that's people are looking towards games for their attainment if they are having trouble with their careers or social skills. So it's still very there's still a lot of research that does need to be done, but there are, I think, definitely people who might have a problem with gaming, and a lot of games are aimed to be some level of kind of keep you hooked in, which makes sense because I mean that's part of the design, and even as a gamer, you want that experience of, oh, I'm just gonna play another hour, and then you realize you've played Civilization all night. But
It's always Civilization.
it is. I've had that happen where I'm like, oh no, it's 2 a.m. So that's not necessarily a bad thing to have a game that wants to put its claws into you, but there are some people that might not respond well to it.
So let's say you go to your physician, okay, and you're getting a checkup or whatever, and you say to them, oh, my knee hurts. And they say, oh, well, how much does your knee hurt? Tell me about your knee pain. And you're like, oh, not really that much, it just kind of bothers me once in a while. So that moment is the moment that they're assessing, is this really impacting your life? Is this keeping you from being happy? And that same concept applies to whether or not somebody is addicted to something, whether or not somebody needs to be diagnosed with an illness associated with something. And so if there's a guy who wants to play games for 18 hours a day and then sleep the rest of the time and is okay with that, it's not really something that gets diagnosed. But as soon as it keeps him from having a happy marriage, keeps him from having a happy family, keeps him from bathing, things like that, then it starts impacting their life enough that you include in a diagnosis. I think it would easily end up fitting in the same category as being addicted to gambling or something of that nature. It's not the same thing financially, perhaps, but it easily would end up in the same category in the DSM.
One thing that you mentioned about how the range is so big because there's still a lot unknown about it, I really wish that people researching this would include game designers as part of their research, because as we've mentioned, people can play games for all different sorts of reasons, and someone who gets addicted to, Candy Crush and is spending all their money on it, the things that are involved in that addiction might be completely different from someone who gets addicted to playing StarCraft continuously. I think that it would benefit to break down again the different player motivations, because it might end up that this person's addictive personality for this game is treatable in a different way than this one. So gaming addiction to me is far too broad. It's like finding the cure for cancer, right? That's not possible because cancers are all so different from each other. So my hope is that going along that professional game designers could be included in some of this research to maybe help pinpoint and distinguish the various individual problems that might come from gaming addiction, since I think they can be really different.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like the studies I was looking at could either go too narrow or too broad, and it was this doesn't seem like it's helpful in either direction. So for too narrow, it could be we're studying specifically addiction for World of Warcraft or something, versus we're studying addiction for all of video games. And it's playing a game of Tetris is way different than if you were spending all of your money on in Genshin Impact, or you are playing a lot of StarCraft or something. So it's hard to. A lot of the studies feel like it'd be interesting to break it down into genres, but even then, there's so many things that are cross-genre that it's a really difficult, I'd imagine, field to do studies in.
It sounds like you could, based on what you guys are saying, you could subcategorize them into let's say impulse control disorder based, or if it's potentially a personality disorder associated. For example, people who are just antisocial in general, antisocial is the wrong word, sorry, avoidant in general, who just don't like socializing in person, but perhaps maybe very addicted to the idea of doing it,
I think that'd be a great way to break it down. Basically, we need to revolutionize how we study gaming addiction, and it's going to start with us three. So. Get your grant proposals ready. I've never written a grant in my life, so what are you going to have to do?
So I do have a more specific game addiction question, but before I do that, are you all familiar with the Tank Gang story? Do you want to hear the tank game story?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, if I get any of this wrong, please let me know.
Okay.
So it was this game developer, they made this game, and it's deceptively simple and straightforward. The game was all of their employees, and it was, I think, everybody. So it was this whole floor. There was this giant board that they put up, like in the staff room or something, where everyone could see it. And everyone got assigned a tank. And every day, you got 3 little poker chips, and that let you, I think it was like, you could rotate your tank, you could move it forward, and you could fire.
Yeah, they're basically actions.
Yep, you get 3 action tokens. And that was it. It was just last tank standing wins. And just from that basis, you're like, well, that doesn't sound... How could that go so horribly that like friendships were ended and people quit their jobs? Alliances can form, and you can give your actions to other people.
That's the key. That was the key right there.
So if all of us were in an alliance, we can all dump our action tokens
Yeah,
on
you can
Prof.
pass his to you can pass mine to you, pass mine to you, and then you can murder everyone on that side of the table.
Yep, and you can just zip. So now you have 9 actions.
Because now the game's no longer about one person's actions, it's about a group of people who
Yes.
don't like you when you go.
Yep. Interpersonal stuff came into it. People who just like, oh, that guy's kind of slacking. We should kill him. And then they metaphorically could.
There were secret plans, and then there were secret plans.
Betrayals,
There
like
were betrayals all over the place.
coworkers you've known for years stab you in the back because their team members knew, oh, so-and-so trusts you, right? And it's like, yeah, of course. Like, we could kill them. So from there, I don't think they even finished the game. I think they literally had to turn it off.
They were like, we have to stop this because people were getting like legit upset, and it was affecting the work environment.
Yeah, so that was a tank game. I will get to you in 1 second, orange hashtag. The more specific game addiction question I have for you is for youth specifically. So I would say, as someone who works in the middle school, through COVID, a lot of our youth went onto online areas, the dubbed Chromebook kids or iPad kids who are hugely into gaming. How do you guys feel about child developmental psychology in relation to games, and what is addiction and what is what?
I think there's a lot of focus on screen time when I think it should be more specific and more nuanced. Like obviously to the child, I think there's a lot of good that come from games, especially playing games with each other. But I feel like it's just like any other thing. Like when it gets to the point where it's impacting their daily life, when it gets to the point where, you know, if your kids are playing competitive multiplayer games that they shouldn't, that's a area ripe for toxicity, and they could pick up very, very negative interaction habits. So I think, you know, obviously I'm not a parent, so I don't have a lot of sway in this, but I think being involved in your kids' gaming hobby seems like the key thing. Just so you know what they're getting into, and maybe can like frame things better if things go off the rails. But I really think it's more nuanced than like no screen time today. But that's just me. I'm obviously biased because I'm a game designer.
I don't know that I know the biochemistry of the brain enough to be able to explain why it's a bad thing, but we as a society, not our society, but as humans, have spent hundreds of thousands of years in societies communicating with each other verbally, physically in contact with one another, doing things for one another, in the presence of each other. And the idea that a kid can grow up normal, thinking normally, after being exposed to daily, doses of 10 hours worth of gaming via this screen or this phone or something, it's not going to work biologically. For that individual, it's not going to work out well for them.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of research that's gone into specifically really young brain development. So I think that people should, especially if they have kids, keep an eye on that. I think that there's specific things about to what age you should even start allowing screen time. I'm not an expert. I'm also not a parent. So, but I think that beyond that, especially as the child gets older, it is a lot about, the parents being involved and knowing what their kids are playing, knowing, hey, what's the kind of content that's in this game? What kind of multiplayer is there? Because you sometimes see parents just go, oh, well, Fortnite is the popular thing, so I can let my 4-year-old play a game where they shoot other people in the face. And it's like, I don't know if that's good. And it's again, like, I'm not a parent, I'm not a child psychologist, so I don't know what the effects of that look like, but I think it really does require a level of, being a present parent, which just to kind of keep an eye on what your kid is actually doing and not just saying, oh, well, they're playing a video game, that's fine, or
it probably is
banning it.
similar to the challenge. I do not envy this for parents, but like keeping your child from being radicalized by the YouTube sidebar. I think that, because I have a lot of friends who are game developers or big gamers, and they talk about how they'll talk to their kids about something that happened in a game. Like if they're playing with other people and someone says something, they'll sit down and have a conversation with them about what happened. And so that can also be, it's just another example of being like involved.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think that it's such a nuanced issue, because I think that there are so many we've already discussed a lot of the positive impacts that it can have. I know that gaming has been a really positive influence in my life. I've met friends through gaming communities. I get a lot of joy out of writing and creating regarding games. So it has been a positive influence, but I think that you just need to kind of be aware.
Not to put anybody on the spot, but are any of you parents of gamers? All right. Do you guys know what your kids are playing, and do you play the games with them?
For mine, they're adults now. But
Okay.
I had a pretty hands-off approach, but I made sure I knew what was going on. Yeah, some of the violent ones, I like, and they were pretty good about that. They didn't really play those as much, but like online stuff, it's a big part of that. So, but it's really how I actually got into gaming, is because, not the violent stuff, but my kids are on the opposite spectrum, and my youngest would come home just grumpy and asking them how the day wasn't going anywhere. So I pulled out the checkerboard and like taught him how to play checkers, very young. And after a period of time, it's just like word vomit about everything that happened in the day. And so this became a thing, and we would just play games together. And so all my kids are all gamers, and we all play games together, and this is how it goes. And they are good because they all can beat me. So yeah, you have a lot of good points. There's good and there's bad, and so you just, like you said, you just have to keep an eye on it, and yeah.
I think that's a really good point, where there is such an opportunity there to not only keep an eye on your kids, but also get involved in something that your kids are interested in and spend time together with your kids. Like my parents never really understood video games, but I would make my dad play Star Wars Episode 1 Racer on the Nintendo 64 with me. It's still a positive, fond memory I have of the times where they would engage with my interests, even if I knew that wasn't their favorite thing in the world. So I think that there's a real opportunity there, if you are a parent, to spend time with your kids and engage in their interests.
I could go on, but didn't someone have a question?
Oh yes, orange hashtag. I made you wait.
When you were talking about the tank game and like what it did to people, one of my first thoughts when you were talking about it was this sounds exactly like Survivor or other regular TV or what is it called again? Whatever TV shows.
Yes. I think I had that same thought when you were talking about it at first. That I was like, it's a reality show mentality. It's the betrayals. It's that horrible person eat person that you see a lot on reality TV. Which
tribalism, right? We humans are made for tribalism. We fall into it so easily.
Which is a reason I don't watch a lot of reality TV. The only competition show I actually watch is the Great British Baking Show because they're all so supportive and kind to each other, and they're not dog eat dog in there. They will help you finish your bake because you don't want a soggy bottom. Did I see a second question? Yes, green circle.
Just going back to the kids and video games, one of the things I think a lot of people didn't put a lot of stock in is how much COVID affected teenagers and young.
Mm-hmm.
So my child is 15, so we started COVID at 10. He's chronically disabled, he's trans, he's Asian, so when all the Chinese flu were going to kill all the Asians, he was terrified. He's had classmates online say things like, we should bomb all the Chinese people. So he's terrified sometimes at school, and it's inaccessible, but gaming is a way for him to socialize, learn empathy, be able to kind of put himself out there without exposing himself too much. And so I don't game with him, but I know what he's doing, and we have a relationship where he talks to me and he tells me his daily struggles. So while I don't necessarily game with him because he's making potions to kill somebody's husband, I know what the game is. But he tells me about it all the time. And I'm like, okay, as long as you know we don't actually make potions.
The husband probably hasn't come out.
So I wanted to comment more on that because I think those things, again, there's a nuance to game design that really shines through. Like when I was growing up, everyone was worried about violent video games. Violent video games make kids violent, which they don't. There's been research after research about this. But people who don't know anything about games see it as a game where you shoot people, that's gonna harm, make my kid violent. And it's not, but what can harm your kid is competitive games with matchmaking. Because matchmaking is one of those things that it revolutionized games and then it made it really easy to play with each other. But compared to the old days when you were playing Quake and you had to get in a lobby and organize a game, matchmaking dehumanizes the other players because you're in there, you're playing a game with them, you leave, you never see them again. You don't have to see them as human beings, and that is what a lot of the online toxicity is generated from. So if there was a kid that was, playing a single player shooter with a lot of blood and gore, like you said, as long as they understand it's not reality, I wouldn't be worried about that at all. But if they're 13 years old and playing Call of Duty online, that's when I would pay attention because those systems are inherently set up in such a way that is dehumanizing, and that can create a lot of toxic behavior. But that's nerdy game design stuff. People who don't play games don't think about that, right? They're not thinking about the systemic effect of matchmaking. They just see there's a game with guns and you shoot people. That's the bad thing. So. Oh yes, sorry. So matchmaking is when you get on to play a competitive game, and a system in the background will take you and it'll find other players and it'll match you together. So these are the group of people who are playing together. And the biggest problem is that it's a very temporary throwaway relationship because, again, you play with these people, you never see them again. They're not people. Versus in olden times, it was very difficult to find people to play with because you had to go find these places. But at least you had a human interaction of trying to overcome the struggle of getting a bunch of people together to play the game. So it was, it's not to say that there wasn't toxic behavior then, but it definitely was was not at the scale of matchmaking as a system. And I don't know how to fix it, because matchmaking also has made it so you can play with people, like where before it was really inaccessible to play multiplayer games. But I think that system was created and no one realized that it would have this knock-on effect. And so, I don't know where I was going with this. Basically, like, those things are the things that can be dangerous to kids playing games, but it's not apparent to parents. Sorry, forget that part. It's not apparent to people who maybe aren't aware of games or don't even have a lot of deep knowledge of game design. So I don't know how to fix that, but...
And a lot of those too kind of come down to the culture of the game as well, and how much effort the devs put into moderation. If you can mute other people or mute yourself, or what kind of game it is. So I feel like it varies just even from game to game. So you might say, you can't even really say no multiplayer, because then that does go, there's a lot of multiplayer games that aren't like that, or might not have that kind of feature or online discussion.
And it's not even just those high-level features like voice chat. It's stuff like the mechanics of the game. Like, the reason League of Legends is so toxic is because you're on a team, and if you make a mistake, it can destroy everything on your team. And that makes it an incredibly toxic environment. Like, the toxicity in League isn't from the people you're playing against, it's from your own team. Versus something like a shooter where maybe, like, if you do bad, it's fine because someone else on the team's really good and they can still rack up a bunch of points, so you don't get that as much. So it can come down to, like, the very core design of how the game works.
This might be apocryphal, but I remember that Blizzard did very specific research on how many people should be on a team for Overwatch. Just for because they wanted to make it so that you felt like you could have an impact on your team, but not that you doing poorly would completely ruin your team so that everybody would get mad at you. And it's like, there's a whole science to that. That is, I think, is incredible.
It's something that is always on the mind of designers making multiplayer games in this day and age, is how to avoid having that happen. Anyway, I can keep talking. I don't want to. All right.
All right. We are in our last 15 minutes or so. I'll open it up. Any other questions? Ooh, yes. Yellow.
Asterisk.
Asterisk.
I just want to say I'm not a parent because I'm a teacher and I couldn't do both. God bless parents. But I have had to call parents before. I'm middle and high school, so older kids. I have had to call parents and tell them what their kids are doing online because kids tell you too much. And it's, yes, there's some game design to it, but a lot of it is like, it's like if you just let your kids go wander the streets for 4 hours every night unsupervised. Right? That sounds like, oh my God, they're just missing for 4 hours.
That was the 80s.
That was,
Right, but I mean, like, then if I came home and I was angry, my parents would be like, well, obviously something bad happened on the streets last night. But like now, parents are like, oh, they're safe, they're at home. And so like, I've had to call and be like, so your child made a bet for $100 and they're trying to sell their belongings at school for this money. So like, which is against the code. And so like, when you talk about game design, some of it's game design, some of it's kids are dumb.
Yeah, they are. They
I
are.
love kids. I love my job, but they're stupid sometimes. And it's like a lot of times. And so some of this is also like they're developmentally at a point where if the parents aren't involved, the psychology of it, yeah, it would be predatory. But like sometimes it is just this game was designed for an adult mindset.
Yes.
Your balls haven't dropped yet. You don't know what's happening.
Well, especially since at that high school level, you are assuming I know everything in the world. And it's like, oh, and then you get to be an adult and you're like, oh no. Exactly, so yeah, I can see that.
Well, going back to the mobile games and the fake X's and all of that, those wouldn't be there if they didn't work.
Yeah.
Like, they put those there because that fools people. And whether that's old people, whether that's young people, whoever they can get, it works. Like, if we all remember back to the flashing, you won an iPod, maybe we knew not to click that. Those got clicked. People were winning iPods left and right, and we all missed out.
Well, that's also, I mean, so much of what's considered like not hacking, but a lot of scams are really just social engineering to get people who are going to be believing in these sort of things, and it works because you get those texts where it's like, "Hi, do I know you?" And I'm like, "No, I don't know you. Bye." But a lot of people might fall for it, or might fall for crypto scams or something, and so much of how people get stuff like passwords or get stuff for like bank information is not hacking, but it's the social engineering that is psychologically driven.
And they're also very targeted towards certain groups, like people who, especially people who English isn't their first language.
Mm-hmm.
They're a huge target, or people who are immigrants, so when they get a call from the FBI about some tax thing, and maybe English isn't their first language, like those are the people who are being preyed upon. So we might be like, oh, who could fall for that scam? No one could ever fall for that scam. But they're preying on vulnerable groups. And so that's why it works.
It's like if you don't work for the IRS, you don't understand how the IRS works anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like some mystery building in the middle of, like an ether, So like if somebody reaches out to me on the phone and says they're from the IRS, my gut instinct is to say, maybe they are.
Yeah, I don't know.
But then I'm like, okay, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hang up on you, and I'm going to call the IRS
Yes.
myself at a different number and see how that goes. But most people who are concerned about that phone call impacting their life won't necessarily take that step.
I have a wonderful anecdote that is not game related, but it's about an old coworker of mine who I will roast any chance I can get. I worked with this guy who's probably 2 or 3 times my age and made twice what I made, who needed help with something with his email. And I said, oh, sure, and I walk over. And I look at it, and it's a window on his screen that says, this was a test. This is a phishing email test. And he said, I can't get to my bank. And I was like, what? And he said, here. And he closes out of that window that I guarantee you he did not read. And there's an email in several fonts that says, bank trouble, whatever, click this link. And he's like, I've clicked this so many times, and this keeps coming up. Where's my bank? And I'm like, and I've done those tests in every line of work I've ever had, and I'm like, why do I need to do this? What idiot clicks this link that's clearly... I found him. If you guys have been looking for him, we worked together. I know where he is. He's fine.
The reason I've had to do so many phishing trainings at work.
That guy. Yellow circle.
So I'm teaching a class on the psychology of games at a university this coming fall, and so I'm wondering if you have any recommendations for articles, books, podcasts, talks that an undergraduate psychology student in a class like that should.
Why aren't you up here?
So obviously I mentioned Quantic Foundry. They've given a number of excellent talks about their research. There was a period of time at GDC where everyone was giving talks about self-determination theory and how huge that was. I know that it's Jason Vandenberg gave a series of talk called The Engines of Play that was really insightful. It was correlated to the Big Five, and he ended up being like, oh, the Quantic Foundry guys have a way better model than me. I'm just going to start using theirs. But I would definitely start with the GDC vaults if you want practical ways that game designers are using that information for sure.
Yeah, those are excellent. So it's all on the GDC YouTube channel, Game Developers Conference, and those are really excellent and I think very accessible talks as somebody that's not in game design but is a game enthusiast. I enjoy watching those a lot. So I think that those could be really, kind of bridge that gap between both being accessible but also being academic in a way.
I would also maybe recommend just a little bit of medical ethics in your curriculum as well, as it could apply strongly.
Yellow asterisk.
Yeah, so when I was growing up, the ESRB was a fairly flawed but decent system for parents to make decisions because it was based off of single player games. Do you think there's additional consideration that needs to be done with rating in terms of these psychologically manipulative tactics? For example, when the ESRB was formed, I don't think loot boxes and gambling mechanics were really a consideration at the time. And I think that there is additional consideration to be had there because a child's mind is not formulated to be able to actually understand statistical probability.
It would be great. It would be great if they updated it, but I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know if they can get the funding for it. It would be a very laborious process considering the stakeholders being large companies with a lot of money that rely on those sort of tactics. And how would it be enforced, I suppose. Those are the big questions. But I think it would be great to update that system because you're right, it was developed in a time where you didn't really have a lot of online multiplayer games. You really have things like free to play and a rated M game. What does that mean? That's it's meaningless. So yes, I think that would be a great idea, but I don't know what it's going to take to make it happen.
Yeah, and I think that I was just trying to do a quick search. I know that the EU has tried to do various regulations on certain monetization and loot boxes and things like that. But I do think that would be really something, especially with the monetization, because a lot of them are, really kind of gambling light in a lot of ways, and I don't know how many parents know that that's the case. I remember when they took out the slot machines in Pokemon, and now I'm well, we have literal slot machines in other games. But I think that would be really helpful because I know when I was a kid, my parents would not buy me an M-rated game until I was old enough, and it's not necessarily the most nuanced system, but it is something that if you're not in gaming, you can go, okay, this is mature rated, it says it's for adults, therefore you're not getting it. So having something that's kind of basic for people to understand, I think would be helpful.
Another thing is a lot of times the regulation that does come up, about COPA, so that was designed to protect children, but it is the way it ended up was structured in such a way that not all of it is really helpful, and it just makes the lives of game developers really hard. So it's never simple, I guess.
I would also say consumers can have a lot of power there. I would say Battlefront 2, I think, was a good example of that thing was a loot box game. That's all it really seemed to be for a while, and then it got enough uproar and fight back that I believe they pulled at least most of, if not all of those out of the game because no one would buy it. So you guys can basically vote with your wallets. If you want less games with loot boxes and all those things, then stop. Not that I'm assuming you guys have a problem. You're in a psychology of gaming panel. Tell your dumb friends to stop buying those games and stop buying loot boxes.
But I think one thing to remember about that is that it's very cultural. In America, we hate that stuff, and we especially hate pay to play, right? We're that's wrong, that's nonsense. But in other cultures, that is totally acceptable norm. It's oh yeah, of course, if you pay more money, you should have the more powerful object. That's obviously. So there's a lot of culture nuance coming in there. So if you're playing a Korean game, then that might be a completely different things that are accepted there are completely frowned upon here, or the other way around. So remember that gaming is a global thing, and that makes things trickier.
I think I saw the yellow asterisk. Yes.
Yeah. So I founded a group called Dragons, Dungeons and Drinks, and we do role-playing games at breweries. And every month I write a one-shot adventure. And I have found that in writing the adventures, I have to write it towards, you know, the 2,000 people we have that all have different tastes and things like that. But one of my favorite adventures actually explored like grief and horror and like going into a grieving nightmare and things like that. And I was curious on if you were seeing any trends in games that like are heavily storytelling, kind of challenge, like engaging in more challenging games, like games that maybe haven't been explored more traditionally.
I mean, absolutely, especially in the indie space. Like, you can find that stuff all over the place. And even it's starting to creep into AAA. What was that game? What is the game I'm thinking of?
The first 5 minutes of Last of Us?
No. It was like about the woman, she was like a warrior, and she would like go into mental health.
Hellblade?
Yeah. So if you're looking for that stuff, like the indie space is just overflowing with it. But yeah, I still think it's more common there than it is in big AAA games.
Thanks.
We are tragically at time, but Orange Hashtag, did you have a quick question?
I just wanted to bring up how the arcades did that sort of money-hungry stuff too.
Yes, the quarters, the incredibly hard games, just keep going.
And yet they also were a huge source of social interaction that we do not have an equivalent to today.
No.
Yeah.
Everything's complicated, y'all. Everything's complicated.
All right. Thank you all for coming. I think there's a QR code at the back if you guys would like to review this panel.